Today we're doing another waiver wire battle, and we're going to be looking at Jalen Coker versus Parker Washington. These two players are vastly different, but have some similarities that we need to look at, and you might prefer one player over another due to how you strategize with your fantasy football team and how you play the game. But before we dig in with this deep dive, you need to click that subscribe button right now. We're doing deep dives every day on as many players as possible. We'll pit these players up against each other to see who you would rather have. On top of that, we're using these videos to help you win the waiver wire all week long. And then we're also using these videos to help you set your lineups. Click that button right now. Stop missing out. Ric Flair's watching. You do not want to disappoint him. But the battle is between Jalen Coker and Parker Washington. Coker is in a situation with Diontae Johnson gone, getting a lot of targets, running a lot of routes, getting a good route participation rate. Kirk is gone for the Jaguars. Washington is pegged to take over that role, work in the slot, run more routes, and see more opportunity, which is something you may want in fantasy football right now. So we got to explore these two wide receivers to see what you like. Jalen Coker blew up last week, has been a hot name in fantasy football circles. 4 catches, 78 yards, 1 touchdown against the Denver Broncos on the road with Bryce Young at quarterback. So looking good, and there's a lot more good things in his prospect profile too coming out of Holy Cross. And on top of that, we've been slowly getting more work since week 5. And with Diontae Johnson out, these two wide receivers, him and Xavier Legette, is seeing an opportunity where they could really put the stamp on things. Adam Thielen's going to be back sooner than later, but in the short term, these two wide receivers can make a name for themselves in the offense, and they both play the game vastly different compared to Adam Thielen. So if they can assert themselves, they could end up with a larger role with Thielen there. However, Parker Washington got some run last week, 74% of the snaps. Brian Thomas Jr. was out with an injury due to that chest injury he got in the back of the end zone. And then also Kirk left the game, allowing Parker Washington to get some more run. He caught 3 balls, 46 yards on 4 targets, seeing that upside. Parker Washington is going to see a much larger role going forward. We're already seeing that last 3 weeks. 29% snap share, 34% snap share. Then it jumps up to 74%. And Kirk is out for the season. This is going to be for the long term. He's going to see more opportunities in this offense. And Parker Washington could cook on some weeks for you in fantasy football. Going back to what he did in college, we played at Penn State. We were not overly productive, but we did break out in 2021, a year 2 breakout here. And ADOT-wise, 11.3 as a freshman, 9.1 2021, and 10.3 in 2022. We have strong hands. We're sticky at the catch point. We do play out of the slot, but we're like a bigger slot wide receiver who's good at bringing in contested catches here. 1,900 yards at Penn State. Not overly productive, but not bad either. But compared to Jalen Coker, we were electric at Holy Cross. We had around a 50% market share of their passing production last year. We finished our career off strong, 15 touchdowns, 11 touchdowns the year prior. We had to be dominant here at the small school level, or there was no chance at seeing the field at the NFL level. 15.1 average depth of target, 15.7 the year prior in 2022. We were getting those targets downfield. We were getting the ball pushed downfield in a slow-paced passing offense, and Jalen Coker was the offense. However, this is at the small school level. So compared to Penn State, that is vastly different. He did dominate his situation and may not have been able to control his situation coming out of high school. He made the best out of it, but Parker Washington went up against better competition over at Penn State in the Big Ten. That being said, you look at this as apples versus oranges, hard to predict. So you're really looking at what you're seeing going forward at the NFL game. They're vastly different with their production profiles since they played in different levels. However, when you look at them one for one, you may pick one over the other. And then Parker Washington, drafted in the 6th round of last year's draft. Jalen Coker goes undrafted. But when you look at that and you think about this year's draft, this was a very deep wide receiver class. The deepest wide receiver class of all time. I've said this in like a million videos with a bunch of different players and prospect profiles. But this wide receiver class had about 20 different wide receivers with day 2 grades or better. Some of them slipped. Jalen Coker was a little bit under the radar, but he was that UDFA wide receiver we were paying attention to. Parker Washington last year was an underrated wide receiver. We knew that could hit if he goes in the right situation because he's vastly strong at the catch point, sticky hands, and can create separation off the break. And now he's going to get his opportunity to prove himself. For a slot receiver or a guy playing out of the slot a lot, he's not strictly a slot guy because he has some nuance to break off the routes. That's just where he's going to be at when you have Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr. in the offense and you're looking at the slot rates. He has good size for the position. Not a pop gun wide receiver, but a guy that is going to be good at the catch point around linebackers. And you're looking at these guys from last week, looking at their work rates. Target share, Coker wins it, but not by much. 6 targets versus 4. Routes, Coker got more. However, we're not looking at this one for one. We're looking at this as in, is anybody getting way more opportunity than the other? And honestly, it's about even. Coker's going to get the deep targets. He's going to get pushed downfield. He's got better ball skills than Parker. There's not many players in the National Football League when it's a one-for-one situation contested that has better ball skills than Jalen Coker. There's just not that many wide receivers out there. He's got sticky hands, but he times things correctly. He does not get pushed around when he's in the air trying to bring in the ball. He's just a very good wide receiver downfield in contested catch situations. On top of that, he saw 103 air yards. Parker Washington with Christian Kirk out. We know he's going to see more reps in the slot. Christian Kirk's been seeing a higher ADOT this year, so he will be having an ADOT probably around 10 or so. 14.3 is probably not where he's going to average out at over a bunch of games. Jalen Coker, 17.2 is going to be a rarity for him. Probably around 12 to 15, though. It should be higher than Parker Washington. However, Coker's got to bring in those contested catches for him to blow up. That could happen, or he could get overshot on some of those as well. But when we're looking at these depth charts here, we're looking at Brian Thomas Jr., Gabe Davis, and Parker Washington. We got some good competition. There's no way I'm targeting Parker Washington over Brian Thomas Jr. I'm going Brian Thomas Jr. heavy in this offense. Gabe Davis was banged up last week. Looks like we're coming back. Looks like we got some competition for targets here. Don't forget about Evan Ingram. He's seeing a good target share. We'll look at him a little bit later. Xavier Legette versus Jalen Coker right now. And you can throw in JT Sanders because his work rate is trending up over these last 3 weeks. Adam Thielen will be back. And I do not see the Panthers supporting 2 wide receivers as consistent fantasy options. However, you can say the same thing about the Jacksonville Jaguars. So when you look at this, which offense can be more spikier for fantasy production? Which player can be more spikier for fantasy production? Which one would you rather prefer for that? And looking at these quarterbacks, I know you would want to prefer the Jacksonville Jaguars. That would make sense with Trevor Lawrence. That would make a lot of sense. Andy Dalton, once he's back in the fold, how much further away as putting out fantasy production for wide receivers is he from Trevor Lawrence, especially when you got Brian Thomas Jr. there, soaking up everything else, spraying the ball around. Andy Dalton doesn't really care. He's not here for the long game. He's here to show things off, finish off this career, look good with the Panthers, be that bridge for their next quarterback. That's what we're seeing with Andy Dalton. However, Bryce Young, we're not expecting much out of him from what we've seen. So if he stays out there, that's because he's improving and looking better and this offense is moving. So we're either seeing Dalton or Young, or if Dalton's really that banged up, he's out more games than what we're thinking. Bryce Young, though, connected with Jalen Coker pretty good last week. So we got a small sample of that. And he knows to look his way from training camp. He's been on the field a lot more. Jalen Coker has. Again, not optimal situations for either wide receiver when you look at the competition in the offense and the quarterback play for both teams. Although you lean with the Jaguars, has been suspect, but you're looking at Jalen Coker. Top 5 in grades per PFF among wide receivers last week. In week 5, second highest grade among rookie wide receivers. He's been playing well. He's been playing up there with some of the top wide receivers in the National Football League. That is something to note. He is a prospect with a good production profile, with good athletic specs that can compete at the NFL game, that has some upside just from a small school, was undrafted. So a lot of people are not willing to put those chips on him yet. But he's a player that has some upside. And you're looking at what he's already done on the season. We got a wide receiver 2 game and a wide receiver 3 game with 10.8 PPR fantasy points. We were able to make something happen already. We're starting to tremble with the fantasy work rate and production. That is something to notice here. Parker Washington did that last year as well. He trembled, and it was very similar. Just how the games kind of correlated was a little bit different. But 2 games where he flashed some production. He did that last year. Now we're getting our second opportunity to prove ourselves. Can we do it? We did not have a Brian Thomas Jr. in this offense last year. Brian Thomas Jr., one of the top wide receivers in the National Football League, a guy to pay attention to. On top of that, Evan Ingram's healthy, soaking up targets. We got Gabe Davis, who's looking to make a run, who had some splash games this year. Something to look at, and you're looking at this offense, you're looking at the routes ran. Christian Kirk ran 220 routes already this season, and that's got to go somewhere. The targets got to go somewhere. He had about 5.9 targets per game, almost 6 a game there. Evan Ingram, I look for him to get more work. I look for him to get more opportunity. I look for Parker Washington, of course, to be running a lot of routes. I look for him to be on the field a lot. I look for Brian Thomas Jr. to possibly get more targets a game. I think 6, his average, is probably going to start being his floor. Why not push it to your top guy? And then Evan Ingram, stud. I think Parker Washington, when it comes to fantasy production, I think it's going to be up and down. I think it's probably going to be volatile. And we're looking at that with Jalen Coker. Diontae Johnson's gone. That's 8.3 targets per game. Zapped out of this offense. Leggett, him, and then eventually Adam Thielen will be sharing the workload. Jatavian Sanders is on the upswing. 53.1% route participation rate on the season. However, these last 3 games, it was a little bit lower against the Broncos last week, has been trending up with the routes ran. So pay attention to him. He may need his own video for those deeper leagues. That being said, Jalen Coker's getting those deep targets. He's earned the starter reps. Jonathan Mingo's just a guy. Jonathan Mingo soured on. It's him versus Xavier Leggett right now in the offense to prove themselves before Adam Thielen comes back. And we're not expecting this team to consistently pump out good fantasy production out of these wide receivers. So we're expecting it to be volatile. But what type of volatility can you catch from a Jalen Coker when things run right? It's probably going to be top tier upside. It's probably going to be targets pushed downfield, probably red zone looks. And when you're looking at these 2 wide receivers, you are really picking your poison here because it could run either way, especially with these situations. The situations could just affect these wide receivers in general and make them both non-assets for fantasy football. However, when I look at Parker Washington, I just question the complete upside. When I look at Jalen Coker, this could be a guy that just sneaks away and wins your league. If not, you can just toss him back. And why I think that is when I look at Christian Kirk, he wasn't doing much anyways. He wasn't doing enough to help you win games anyways. So why the hell would Parker Washington do that? So I'm going to lead in Jalen Coker here as an upside gamble that if he hits this back half of the season could be a massive hit compared to what Parker Washington has the potential to do on the field. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out. One thing for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.